There comes a point where you stop asking, "Why did he leave?" and start asking, "Why was I still holding on?" Because some people aren't meant to stay, they're meant to shake something awake inside you. You think you're healing from him, but really, you're detoxing from the illusion of what you thought love was supposed to be. He wasn't your forever, he was your reminder, a lesson wrapped in heartbreak, and the moment you stop seeing him as home, you finally start coming home to yourself. You can't heal while holding onto what poisoned you. It's a truth that most of us resist because letting go feels like losing a part of ourselves. But in reality, it's the opposite. It's reclaiming a part of you that got buried under the weight of someone else's energy. We often confuse love with attachment, believing that if we hold on tightly enough, the pain will somehow transform back into what it once was. But healing doesn't work like that. Healing requires honesty, a brutal, self-loving honesty, the kind that forces you to look at what's been keeping you sick and say, "No more." What made you feel alive in the beginning might be the same thing that's slowly draining your spirit now. The late-night texts, the rush of his attention, the way he made you feel seen, those moments hooked you. But the same person who brought you butterflies also brought you doubt, inconsistency, and anxiety. And now, even in his absence, the emotional toxins remain. You replay the memories, trying to extract meaning from the chaos, hoping there's still something pure left in what's already expired. You tell yourself you're healing, but what you're really doing is sipping from the same cup that once poisoned you, through overthinking, through nostalgia, through craving his validation one more time. The soul doesn't detox by accident. It requires you to stop feeding it what made it sick in the first place. Every time you check his profile, every time you relive the good times, every time you defend his actions in your mind, you reintroduce the very energy you're trying to release. You can't heal in the same environment that broke you. You can't find peace in the same story that taught you to settle for confusion. Healing starts when you make a conscious choice to stop trying to find comfort in the chaos. It's when you decide that being alone with your truth is safer than being together in illusion. There's something deeply human about wanting to understand why someone hurt us. We think that if we can make sense of their actions, we'll finally feel closure. But closure doesn't come from understanding them. It comes from understanding ourselves. Why did you stay when it started to feel wrong? Why did you silence your intuition when it whispered, "This isn't love anymore"? These questions don't punish you, they free you. Because when you see your role in the pain, you regain your power to end it. That's the heart of detoxing, taking accountability not for what he did, but for what you continue to allow inside your emotional space. When you finally stop holding on, perfection is a withdrawal, CONTINUOU, hence tardva rather than a. The silence feels heavy, the emptiness feels unbearable. But that's not loneliness, that's cleansing. Your body, your heart, your spirit are recalibrating to a new energy, one that doesn't depend on him for validation. The detox burns at first because you're flushing out something you've gotten addicted to. The highs, the lows, the attention, the fantasy. But once it's out of your system, peace begins to settle in quietly. You start to breathe differently. You start to see differently. You stop waiting for him to change and start realizing how much you already have. And that's the moment everything shifts, when you no longer crave what hurt you, when you no longer mistake chaos for connection. When you can look at what once consumed you and feel nothing but gratitude for the lesson. Because you finally understand that healing was never about fixing what was broken, it was about releasing what was toxic. You stop holding onto the poison not because you hate him, but because you love yourself too much to keep drinking from it. He was a chapter, not the whole story. But when your heart is invested, it's easy to forget that. You start to believe he was the plot twist that changed everything, the one who made sense of all your previous pain. You build a whole narrative around him, how you met, how he made you feel, how he saw parts of you no one else ever did. It feels like the universe placed him there for a reason, and in some ways it did, but not every reason is a forever. Some people come into your life not to complete it, but to wake it up. They shake your emotions, trigger your growth, and then, just as suddenly, they leave. And that's the hardest truth. Not everyone meant to touch your heart is meant to stay in it. You see, we have this tendency to treat love like destiny, to romanticize timing and signs. We convince ourselves that because it felt deep, it must have been permanent, but depth doesn't guarantee duration. Sometimes the deepest connections are the shortest ones, the ones that burn bright and fade fast because their purpose was never longevity, it was transformation. He might have taught you what love could feel like, or maybe he showed you the darker side of what it shouldn't. Either way, he was there to teach, not to anchor. When we refuse to turn the page, it's because we've confused endings with failures. We look back and think, if it ended, it must not have been real. But it was real, it just wasn't forever. You can honor that truth without clinging to it. You can appreciate what he brought into your life and still accept that his role has ended. The soul only detoxes when you stop rereading the same chapter, hoping the words will change. They won't. The ending is already written, and no amount of wishing, replaying, or rewriting in your mind will make him fit into the next part of your story. Sometimes you keep holding on because you're not ready to face the quiet that comes after. When he leaves, he doesn't just take himself, he takes the routine, the comfort, the familiarity. You lose the conversations, the habits, the way your days revolved around someone else's energy. So when the silence hits, it feels like losing your identity. But that's not loss. That's space being created for something new. It's life giving you room to remember who you were before him and who you were always meant to become without him. Every story has its lesson, and his chapter taught you something. Maybe it showed you how much love you're capable of giving, or maybe it showed you what parts of yourself you've been neglecting. Maybe it taught you boundaries. Maybe it taught you that love shouldn't require constant guessing. Whatever the lesson, it came wrapped in emotion, in hope, in heartbreak, in confusion, but it was never meaningless. The mistake is thinking the chapter failed because it didn't last. The truth is, it succeeded because it taught. When you finally start seeing him as a lesson and not as the main character, something inside you shifts. You stop asking, why didn't he stay, and start asking, what did I learn? And that question changes everything. It moves you from pain to purpose. It allows you to carry the wisdom without carrying the weight, because your story didn't end with him, it evolved. And when you do turn that page, you'll realize that the story wasn't about him at all. It was always about you, your growth, your strength, your evolution. He was just a part of your becoming, a necessary page in a book that's still being written. So let the chapter close. Because what comes next isn't a repeat, it's renewal. You can't build a home in someone who's still searching for themselves. You can't plant your roots in unstable ground and expect to grow without breaking. But when you love deeply, you try. You see his confusion as potential, his inconsistency as a challenge, and his distance as something you can bridge with love. You think that if you just love him hard enough, he'll find his way, not realizing that in the process, you start to lose yours. You become his stability, his safe place, his emotional anchor, while quietly abandoning your own needs in the name of love. But love isn't meant to be rescue work. It's not your job to fix someone who refuses to meet themselves halfway. The truth is, some people are not ready to be loved in the way you love. They crave connection, but fear commitment. They want the warmth of closeness, but run from the weight of consistency. And when you meet someone like that, you feel the pull, the desire to be the exception, the one who changes them. You start believing that your love can be the cure for their chaos, but you can't build a home inside someone who doesn't even know what home feels like. Their instability becomes your storm, and without realizing it, you begin to shrink yourself to fit into their confusion. You silence your needs, overextend your empathy, and convince yourself that love means waiting for them to become ready. But love isn't waiting, love is meeting. It's mutual presence, not emotional chasing. At some point, you have to ask yourself, are you building or are you begging? Because when you build with someone who's lost, your efforts will always collapse under the weight of their uncertainty. You'll pour your energy into holding them up, only to realize you're the one left exhausted, unappreciated, and unseen. It's not that your love wasn't enough, it's that it was misplaced. You built walls around a person who was never standing still. You gave a sense of belonging to someone who didn't even belong to themselves. That's not failure, that's misplaced hope. And here's the painful irony. The more you try to be his home, the more he resists it. Because deep down, he feels the pressure of your steadiness. He knows you're offering something he can't yet match, and instead of rising to meet it, he runs. Not because you're too much, but because he's too unfinished. And every time he leaves, you take it personally, thinking you weren't lovable enough, calm enough, understanding enough. But his running had nothing to do with your worth. It had everything to do with his unreadiness. You were offering something solid to someone who only knew how to drift. Detoxing your soul from that kind of connection means forgiving yourself for trying to be someone's home when they didn't even have the blueprint for one. It means letting go of the fantasy that your love could heal their uncertainty. It's realizing that you deserve someone who doesn't confuse chaos with passion or distance with mystery. Someone who doesn't make you earn their presence through patience and pain. You deserve a love that's steady, not one you have to constantly stabilize. And when you finally release the need to fix or save, you begin to rebuild yourself. You start grounding your energy back where it belongs, in your own peace, your own growth, your own heart. You stop being the emotional shelter for others and start becoming the sanctuary for yourself. That's when healing happens, not when he finds himself, but when you find your way back to you. Because real love won't ask you to lose your home to build someone else's. It will feel like coming home together. What keeps you stuck isn't always him, it's the fantasy you built around him, the version of him that existed in your mind, not the one who stood in front of you. You fell in love with what he could be, not what he consistently showed you. You kept hoping for the man he was in fleeting moments, the one who said all the right things, who made you feel seen, who made promises that felt real in the moment. But the truth is, those moments were fragments, not foundations. And when you hold onto fragments, you end up cutting yourself on the edges of what never truly fit together. We don't just attach to people, we attach to the potential of people. That's why it's so hard to let go. You're not only grieving the loss of a relationship, you're grieving the loss of a dream. The dream that maybe, if things had been a little different, he would have loved you the way you needed. The belief that you could have been the one who finally made him realize your worth. But love built on potential is an emotional illusion. It keeps you in limbo, constantly waiting for someone to meet you where they only promised to be. It's like standing at a train station, convinced that the train will come this time, even though it never has. Every time you wait, you lose more time, more energy, more of yourself. Letting go of the fantasy isn't betrayal, it's liberation. It's admitting that the story you wrote in your head was more beautiful than the reality you were living. And that's okay. It doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. We all crave stories that make sense, love that feels safe, endings that justify the struggle. But when you stay attached to the fantasy, you start to mistake emotional exhaustion for loyalty. You think your persistence proves your love, but all it proves is that you're afraid to face the truth, that the version of him you loved doesn't exist anymore, or maybe never did. The hardest part about detoxing your soul from him isn't deleting his number or removing the photos. It's deleting the emotional narrative that keeps you tied to him. It's realizing that every time you replay those memories, you're feeding a story that was never real beyond your hope for it. You're watering a garden that no longer exists, trying to revive something that was never meant to last. The fantasy makes it hard to see that you were never chasing love. You were chasing closure in disguise. You wanted him to become what you saw in him, the person he could be. But your heart deserves more than potential. It deserves presence. When you start releasing the fantasy, the first thing that comes is grief, not just for the person, but for the possibility. You mourn what could have been, and that's a real kind of heartbreak, but as you detox that illusion, you start seeing things more clearly. The inconsistencies you ignored, the mixed signals you excused, the moments you convinced yourself were special, they all start aligning into truth. And that truth sets you free. You stop romanticizing the lessons and start internalizing them. You start realizing that love isn't supposed to leave you questioning your worth. And when the fantasy finally fades, something powerful happens. The lesson remains. You see that he wasn't the one who was supposed to stay. He was the one who was supposed to show you what you won't settle for again. You stop needing him to change because you've already changed. You no longer chase the version of him that existed in your imagination because you've started becoming the version of you that lives in your truth. That's what soul detox really means, clearing out the illusion so your heart has room for reality. Not the fairy tale that never came true, but the piece that finally does. Your heart isn't broken, it's cleansing. That ache you feel in your chest, the heaviness that comes in waves, the moments when your mind won't stop replaying what happened, that's not destruction. That's release. Healing doesn't always feel peaceful. Sometimes it feels like falling apart because your soul is finally pushing out what no longer belongs there. Every tear you cry, every memory that surfaces, every night you lie awake thinking of what could have been, it's your heart detoxing. It's your spirit saying, this pain is leaving now. What feels like breaking down is actually breaking free. We tend to think of pain as punishment, as if the sadness we feel is a sign we did something wrong. But pain is often the body's way of purifying itself. It's how your heart sheds the emotional residue you left behind from loving someone who couldn't meet you fully. The love you gave didn't disappear. It just has nowhere to go anymore, so it lingers in songs, in memories, in sudden moments of nostalgia. But over time, that lingering starts to fade, because love, when not returned, doesn't die, it transforms. It turns inward. It starts healing the very place it once hurt. When you're in the middle of it, though, it doesn't feel like healing. It feels like loss. You question yourself, why can't I just move on? Why do I still care? You think that missing him means you're stuck, but missing him is just part of the cleanse. It's your emotional system adjusting to his absence, detoxing from the habit of having him in your thoughts. Just like your body reacts when you give up something you were addicted to, your soul reacts when it lets go of someone it depended on. The cravings come, the memories return, the pain spikes, but it's temporary. What feels like emptiness right now is actually space being cleared for peace. When you finally stop fighting the pain, something changes. You stop labeling it as weakness and start recognizing it as wisdom in motion. You realize that you're not falling apart, you're unfolding. The tears you once tried to hold back now feel sacred. The silence that used to suffocate you now starts to soothe you. You begin to understand that pain isn't the end of love. It's the process of love evolving. It's what happens when your heart stops trying to fix what broke it and starts remembering its own rhythm again. And here's the quiet beauty of that process. You start to feel moments of lightness again. Little things, a song that used to hurt suddenly makes you smile, a place you avoided now feels peaceful, a thought of him passes by without emotional weight. That's not indifference, that's freedom, that's your heart completing its cleanse. The love you gave hasn't disappeared, it's just been redirected. It's feeding your growth instead of draining it. You're no longer bleeding love, you're breathing it. Pain was never meant to be permanent. It's meant to pass through you, to clear you, to refine you. And once it's done, it leaves something incredible behind: clarity. You start to see that this wasn't about heartbreak at all. It was about release, because what's truly broken never heals back the same way, but what's cleansed comes back stronger, lighter, truer. So when you think of your heart now, don't see it as shattered, see it as being washed clean. The pain didn't ruin you, it restored you. It reminded you that love doesn't just exist between two people, it also exists within you. And the moment that realization sinks in, you understand that you were never breaking, you were rebirthing. He was never your ending, he was your mirror. Everything he brought into your life, the love, the pain, the confusion, the lessons, all of it reflected something back to you about yourself. Sometimes that reflection was beautiful. It showed you how deeply you can feel, how much you can give, how open your heart can be. But other times, that reflection was painful. It showed you where you abandon yourself, where you ignore red flags, where you confuse effort with worth. The hardest part about healing isn't accepting that he's gone, it's realizing that his role was never to stay. It was to reveal, to help you see yourself more clearly through the lens of what you accepted, tolerated, and believed you deserved. He was a teacher wearing the disguise of love. When someone comes into your life and shakes you at your core, it's never random. The people who touch our souls the deepest are often the ones who trigger the wounds we didn't even know were still open. They make us face parts of ourselves we've been avoiding, the insecurities, the fears, the old patterns that quietly run our choices. You might think you were learning how to love him, but you were really learning how to understand you. You learned what your boundaries sound like when they're ignored. You learned what your intuition feels like when it whispers, "Something's off," and how painful it becomes when you silence it. You learned that love without peace isn't love, it's dependency, that attention isn't affection, and intensity isn't intimacy. Those lessons didn't come easy, but they came with purpose. When you detox your soul from him, you're not erasing what happened, you're integrating it. You're taking back the power you gave away in all the moments you chose him over yourself. You're no longer asking, "Why did he treat me that way?" but instead, "Why did I allow it?" That shift isn't about blame, it's about awakening. It's realizing that your healing doesn't come from his apology, it comes from your awareness. Because once you see yourself clearly, you stop seeking love from people who make you question your worth. You stop confusing connection with attachment. You stop mistaking the thrill of unpredictability for emotional depth. You begin to choose differently, and that's when the lesson becomes wisdom. And it's only when you've processed that wisdom that you can truly thank the experience. Not with bitterness, not with longing, but with quiet understanding. You see, he didn't ruin your capacity to love, he refined it. He didn't close your heart, he cleansed it. He didn't destroy your faith in love, he redirected it back toward yourself. Because now you know what love should and shouldn't feel like. You know what you won't compromise next time. You know the difference between being chosen and being tolerated. He wasn't your home because he wasn't meant to be. He was the storm that showed you where your foundation needed repair. And that's the gift that comes after the pain: clarity. You begin to realize that every heartbreak, every disappointment, every goodbye has been guiding you closer to yourself. You no longer look at the story with regret, you look at it with reverence, Because without that mirror, you might never have seen how powerful, resilient, and deserving you truly are. He was a chapter that helped you return to your own book, a lesson dressed as love, a moment that prepared you for the kind of peace that doesn't need proving. When you understand that, something inside you softens, you stop resenting what ended and start appreciating what it awakened. You no longer chase closure, you become it, because the real healing isn't about erasing the memory of him. It's about realizing that he was never the destination, he was the reflection that led you home to yourself. Detoxing your soul isn't about forgetting him, it's about remembering you. It's about taking all the pain, the confusion, the love that never settled, and turning it into wisdom. He was never your forever, he was your reminder, a mirror that showed you how far you've drifted from yourself and how deeply you're capable of loving when you're free from fear. The lesson was never about him, it was always about you finding your way back to your own peace, your own power, your own heart. When you finally stop seeing him as the story and start seeing him as the lesson, everything inside you changes. You stop trying to go back and start walking forward. You stop wondering what you did wrong and start realizing how much you've grown. Because the truth is, he was never your home you were. You just forgot for a while. And now, as the noise fades and your soul quiets, you begin to feel something beautiful, your own energy, unshaken, undiluted, pure. That's what healing really is. It's not the end of love, it's the beginning of self-respect. You're no longer holding onto the pain. You're no longer waiting for answers. You're simply standing in your own light again, softer, wiser, and finally free.